Addictions men can't break in prison and why they can't break them. Let's talk about it. One of the number one addictions that you see in prison and you see men struggle with is caffeine. That's right, caffeine. And that's the one that had me wrapped around its finger was caffeine. Had to have my coffee in the morning, in midday, had to have my coffee at night. I went to sleep on that coffee. That coffee had me going crazy. Now, coffee's not one of the addictions that's going to get you wrapped up in all kind of mess to where you get your manhood taken. Coffee's just something that still takes a hold of you. Let's be honest. But let's get into the real addictions, the ones that people really struggle with in prison. Punks. That's right. People can go to prison and they get addicted to having sex with dudes' butts. That's right. They get addicted to having sex because they had sex on the streets. So they get to prison. They still want to have sex and there's no way to have sex. So they get involved with punks or they become a punk. They give up their butt or they go to taking butts. It's disgusting and it's sad. You know what I mean? Because it proves, and the reason I say it's disgusting and sad, one, because it's wrong in the Bible. And number two, it's because it proves a lack of self-control. And that's going to go into another one of the addictions in prison that relates to punks. Not necessarily, but it's still sexual in nature. And that's shop books, pornographic material. You know, I don't know how the prisons are now, but back then, man, if you wanted to rent a shop book from somebody who had all the shop books in their locker, you know, the dude who was renting out shop books like you're going into the Blockbuster video. And you remember they had this section when you walked in and it said adults only, minors not allowed in here. Yeah, the one that you used to sneak into when you was a little kid. Well, in prison, they got a dude who's running shots and who got all the shop books, and he's making the calls, and he's renting shop books out for whatever he chooses. 2 soups, pack of cigarettes, or your manhood. I don't know what he's doing, but that's another addiction. Dudes get addicted to shop books in prison, and so they're giving up all the money that their mom and their dad sends them, or their wife sends them, or whoever sends it to them, and they're using that money to buy a canteen, and then they're taking the canteen and renting out shop books on midnight on a Friday and Saturday night when they got movie night all night. And the guards are more lax or whatever it is. They're renting out shop books, pornographic material, and they're going to sit on the toilet and masturbate. And they spending all their soup money on that. Listen, I was in prison. I did a total of about 9 years in prison. So I know that's 9 years where you don't have, a female companion or you don't have sex. That's the reality of prison. But you put yourself in there, so you need to learn self-control. And that's what I'm getting to. Addictions take control of people. And in prison, punks and pornographic material takes control of men. It grabs a hold of them. And I'm sure the same thing is as in women's prison. They become turned out too. But in men's prisons, where I've experienced, dudes' sexual drive is so strong. I had a dude tell me one time, he said, man, my sex drive's too strong. They told me I was going to be, mess with punks. And he said, nah, there ain't no way in the world I'm going to mess with no punks. Man, it was like Nostradamus. Whoever told him that spoken into his life. And guess what he started doing? He started messing with punks. That's right. He said, I couldn't control myself, man. I had to have these boys, these men's butts. And I said, man, I'm a man, I'm in prison too, man, but we got to have some kind of self-control, man. You got to have some kind of principles and beliefs that guide you in life. And you got to be able to control yourself and restrain yourself so you don't do stuff that changes you. You let the prison change you in the wrong way instead of letting the prison change you in the right way. And so he had to deal with that. I'm sure I don't know what happened to him. He's probably still dealing with that for the rest of his life. And another addiction in prison that dudes go to prison and get involved in is that dope. I met a dude one time. He went to prison when he was like 17 years old. And he spent like 30 something years in prison. And by the time I met him, he went to prison in the 60s. By the time I get to the prison in the 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, I meet the dude. He was in Angola most of the time. He's chopping it up with me, telling me all the stories about the pen. I'm in a little satellite camp with him. And he's telling me, man, my family had a college tuition set aside for me. But I never went to college. Instead, I went to prison. And he said they still honored me by sending the money to my account while I was in prison. He said he used that money while he was in the pen in Angola, Louisiana, and he was shooting dope with it, all through the 70s and 80s and 90s. He was shooting dope. He said he shot dope. Instead of getting a master's degree, he got a degree in how to shoot heroin. And that's what he did. He was shot heroin. That was the thing back in the day. He shot heroin the entire time he was in prison. So that was his addiction, drugs. Dudes can't stop using drugs. They want drugs so bad. I remember going to jail. I don't smoke no cigarettes. And cigarettes is another addiction. Nicotine. Man, they like to smoke. And some people who smoke, they drink that coffee too. Coffee, one hand, cigarette in the other. Coffee, sip, cigarette, puff. Coffee, sip, cigarette, puff. Addicted. No self-control. And listen, I understand. I have an extreme personality. I know what addiction is. I'm still drinking coffee to this day. You know, I need to cut back on caffeine. Restarted drinking Monster Energy drinks to drink. You can't let caffeine control your life. Doesn't matter what the addiction is. We should have control over it, not it have control over us. Food, that's another thing. You know, getting the gluttony in prison. Dudes could just start eating Zuzus and Wham Whams all day long and not working out. They're rotting away. They're becoming obese in prison. It don't happen to a lot of people because most people want to work out. But some of them dudes who got them crazy charges, man, they get in there and get depressed. They start eating all them honey buns. And so dudes, you know, using drugs. And so in the parish jail, they smoking that Cinequine. They give them that Cinequine to make them go to sleep because they can't sleep because they're so drove. So instead, they smoking that Cinequine and the cigarettes dipped in. Instead of embalming the fluid, they do on the street. And now they dipping the cigarettes in the Cinequine. And in the parish jail, you know, they smoking them cigarettes in the Cinequine. I ain't gonna lie, I smoked it a couple times. You know, probably half a dozen times in my life while I was in there, I smoked it. You know, you got all that time. Plus, I was 17, 18 years old when I hit the parish jail. So I'm still stupid and dumb. That's another addiction, drug addiction, man. You get up the road and you still using drugs. You can't stop smoking weed. Dudes want to smoke weed the whole time. Man, dudes give up their butts to get drugs and narcotics. Don't do that in prison, man. Don't go to prison and get involved in addictions. Getting all kind of addictions in prison. You get caught up in all kind of stuff. Don't do that. You know, learn self-control. Prison's wild like that. It's full of addictions. What I'm saying is we gotta, as men, have control over our addictions. And some of this stuff we shouldn't be doing anyway. You know, because some of these dudes go to prison and they get involved with punks and then they go home and they don't tell, you know, the people that they was doing it with punks and they start having a relationship and they passing on diseases. How somebody's going to respect that? Man, at least you got to be clear about who you was and what you did. If not, stand on your principle. Don't do that. I saw some strong-minded men in prison. I considered myself strong-minded. I didn't let it break me. I stood up and fought for myself. I did my time on my terms. You know, it wasn't perfect. But I kept some kind of resemblance of dignity. And what I mean by that, yeah, I smoked a little weed in there, but I didn't go overboard. I had more control over it than me. And at that point, there's a point in your incarceration where you realize you got to start doing better things. So I started reading stuff, getting my mind knowledge. I started praying and meditating. I did a lot of journaling. It helped me find out who I was. I see dudes, man, they are 15, 20 years in, and they doing the same exact thing. Talking the same way. They talk worse than what they... And listen, you're going to get your vernacular from prison because you do all that. The more time you spend in it, the more time you're going to sound like the jail. That's just a reality. But you got to do your best to enhance your vocabulary. All you want to read is Iceberg Slim books, you know, about pimping. The library's full of law books that just sit there on the shelf collecting dust and classics. I had a dude who had to teach me, man, what the classics was. He said I was reading trash. The trash he said I was reading, Stephen King, Anne Rice, you know, the regular stuff like that. That ain't going to help you enhance your mind. You know, I started reading Herman Melville and Charles Dickens. I read Colin Powell's autobiography. I read about Richard Nixon. Man, quit being stupid while you're in prison. Then you get out here, you still want to gangbang. You want to rep on YouTube. I have nothing to prove to nobody. You're always trying to prove something to nobody. It changed your life for the better. Trying to rep. You look like an idiot in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. Trying to rep a set. That's dumb. Man, rep for your family and your society. Contribute. Quit taking from it. Still wasting taxpayers' money on probation and parole for the 5th, 6th, and 7th, and 8th time. That's stupid. That's all you. And you're offended. You want to get on YouTube saying, I'll do somebody something. Man, you need to do yourself something. Break the addictions. Break the habits. Change your life, man, on the real. Seriously. And that's just my rant on addictions and people in prison. And I'm checking myself because there's still things in my life I got to work on. I look in the mirror all the time. What can I do to get better? You should do the same thing. Signing out. Let's get it.